Greetings, comrades. My name is Gigantles, and we have a new Pope. Or more specifically, we have Pope Leo the 14th now in charge of the Catholic Church. Unfortunately, I missed the white smoke. I'd been there to watch the both times there was black smoke, but yeah, I missed the white smoke unfortunately because the TV was off. And then when I heard there was white smoke, I went to watch the TV so that I could make sure that I could see who the new pope was. One post I read on Facebook described the situation quite well. That this whole concept of what was it, papal cardinals? That's a complete media fabrication. There is no such concept in the church because our opinions in who may become the next pope doesn't matter. It's whoever the cardinals choose is guided by the Holy Spirit if they listen to him. So when you had such papal candidates such as Cardinal Tagle, I believe the Filipino cardinal, and then Cardinal Burke, so the liberal cardinal, then the conservative cardinal. There was all this talk about who may be the next pope between this small group of cardinals, but then when Cardinal Provost, Robert Provost, I believe his name is, when he was elected, very few people outside the church, outside the cardinals, saw him as a potential candidate compared to the other papal candidates. And it goes to show that, as I said, this whole concept of papal candidates doesn't really exist within the church. That's just made up to bring attention to a select few outspoken cardinals among the potential candidates for the next papacy. And I guess it's sort of like the situation with Pope St. John Paul II, how he wasn't seen as a major candidate to be the next pope, but he still won the conclave anyway. And so congratulations to Pope Leo the 14th. As well as when I was sitting there listening to Sky News, watching Sky News, and the cardinal was talking about who became the next pope, I didn't recognize the name, and then when he said the papal name, I immediately knew he was talking about Pope Leo the 14th. And whenever anyone hears the name Pope Leo, they're going to think of one of three people, or one of three popes. The first is Pope St. Leo I, who convened the, at the time, largest ecumenical council in history, at the Council of Chalcedon, which dealt with Eutychianism. Then there was, and he also helped convince Attila the Hun to leave the city of Rome alone. The second Pope Leo would be Pope Leo X, who excommunicated Martin Luther. And then the third Pope Leo, which is probably the most popular one, or maybe at least second most popular one, is Pope Leo XIII. I'm not sure why his process of canonization hasn't started yet, but I hope it does. Pope Leo XIII lived on the border of the 19th and 20th centuries. He wrote a huge amount regarding the social teachings of the church, and he also condemned things like communism, socialism, abuses of capitalism, I believe as well. And he also, at the time, wrote a condemnation of what was known as Americanism. And for those of you who don't know, at the time, there was concern among some French cardinals and bishops that, according to I can't think of the right word now, but there are a number of principles upon which the United States is founded upon. There are a number of principles that the United States is founded upon in regards to like philosophy and sociology. And there was concern among the French bishops that the American bishops and cardinals were interpreting Catholicism through a political lens of these philosophical and sociological principles, which would be heretical. And so then Pope Leo XIII condemned this as Americanism, and the American bishops wrote back saying that the concerns of the French bishops were unfounded, and such heresies weren't present in the United States. Pope Leo XIV has made clear that he is inspired by Pope Leo XIII, and something he wants to deal with is not the threat necessarily, but concerns about AI, because that's going to become quite a big thing in the next few years if it hasn't already. And something I've noticed when it's even within minutes of Pope Leo XIV's election is just how unreasonable some of the because there's someone sitting in the seat of St. Peter, we're no longer sedevacantists, but the perpetual sedevacantists, as well as the radtrads and restorationists and whatever else you want to call them, you can really see the sheer ludicrosity of their position now, because when it came with Pope Francis, when he was elected, I don't think there was too much controversy about that. And then as Pope Francis started talking and doing stuff, then controversy after controversy started being framed by these people within the church, or sometimes outside of the church. With the election of Pope Leo XIV, he hadn't even been in power for an hour, and there were already people claiming that he wasn't a valid pope, that he was a heretic, that he was a Mason, and so on. And so it goes to show just how ridiculous the position of these neo-Protestants are, because that's what they are. If you are protesting against the teachings of the church, you are a Protestant. The difference is that the reformers were the Protestants of their generation, and their Protestantism was enhanced when their beliefs were condemned by the Council of Trent. And the modern day generation of Protestantism are those who reject the teachings of the Second Vatican Council and the teachings of all the popes after that. Because even if the teachings that the popes since the Vatican Council, even if those teachings aren't infallible, that doesn't mean that they can just necessarily be dismissed as if it was someone else's opinion, because that's not what they are. They are the teachings of the Pope, and they should be taken into special consideration. And so it's almost like this threat of phantom Americanism that Pope Leo XIII was condemning has in some way taken hold within the US lately, because that's where most of the super critical writers and people condemning the recent popes. Look, there's an ambulance. Anyway, so it's within the US that there's a lot of the more radical radtrads, restorationists, and whatever other titles they want to use. That's where they live, and they seem to be really influenced by their political beliefs instead of their religious beliefs. So, I'm not going to condemn entire political parties here, or people who follow political individuals, because that's not what I'm trying to do. It's just that they hold up these politicians as standards of what it means to be conservative or traditional or whatever, and for some reason they then condemn the Pope as being liberal or progressive or whatever. But conservatism and liberalism in the church, or progressivism and traditionalism too, what they mean in the church isn't the same as what it means in secular politics. And by definition, every single member of the Catholic clergy is more traditional and conservative than political leaders that we may consider conservative and traditional, because it's not just about something like immigration policies. You also have to look at things like their stances on abortion, on IVF, on contraception, on pornography, and so on. And so when you have these super political radtrads come along and call the Pope a progressive or liberal just because he disagrees with one thing, no, not one thing. He disagrees with the select few things relating to a political administration. That doesn't mean that he's necessarily a liberal or progressive. It's really stupid reasoning, and similar to the concern that Pope Leo XIII had, in which it was American secular philosophies and sociology that was influencing the Catholic Church in the country. That seems to be happening nowadays, not in the same way, but in almost like a new generation or a new wave of Americanism, but it's not up to me to define that. And I hope that as Pope Leo the 14th comes along and he starts writing and speaking, he is able to reach out to these people who are already outright condemning him, and just show them that he's not that sort of political, that he is nonetheless Catholic. He holds Catholic teachings, as all popes have done, and that they realize the error of their ways. It already seems to be somewhat promising with individuals like Taylor Marshall, who's typically been very critical of Pope Francis, and at one point in time he seemed to even endorse sedevacantism with some of his statements. But he's already shown his support for Pope Leo the 14th, so that's good news. If Pope Leo the 14th is more if he is more conservative and traditional than Pope Francis is, then it will give us an opportunity to see whether or not the people who disagreed with Pope Francis really disagreed with him because he was more progressive and liberal than they wanted, or if they just wanted an excuse to hate the church and her popes as it is now. So again, it depends on what the Pope does. And I just realized my phone's slipping. Sorry. Let me just tighten. No, that's the wrong way. Let me just tighten that. Okay, I'm going to have to get a new stand for my phone because it's broken. Anyway, so I wish Pope Leo the 14th a long and successful papacy in continuing the mission of the church, in helping bring those who are already in the church closer to Christ, and bringing those who are outside the church towards Christ. It's unfortunate that he's not been pope for very long, and there are already people calling him an anti-pope and a heretic and everything, which is just ridiculous. But it at the very least shows the ridiculous position and preconceptions, if that's the right word, of those who already hate the church or the Vatican II church and all the popes after that. So hopefully that will prevent people from necessarily believing everything that these new Protestants believe, and hopefully other people will realize that you shouldn't just impose political standards upon religious individuals, because the church is an institution that is almost 2,000 years old. So we shouldn't judge it by secular politics within as the standards of secular politics as they exist within our lifetimes, or even 100 years ago, because that's going to give a flawed that's going to produce a flawed perception of the church. So with the seat of Saint Peter filled now, we must start praying for the Pope, for him to be healthy and to continue serving the mission of the church, and serving God, as well as to pray for the repose of, I may not have mentioned this last time, but to pray for the repose of both Pope Francis and Pope Benedict XVI, that they may hopefully one day enter the beatific vision, if that is where if they are currently in purgatory being cleansed or whatever. And I guess hopefully, no, sorry, scratch that, hopefully. And I guess also pray for I'd like to think that we start canonizing some of the popes from the last century that haven't already been canonized, like Venerable Pope Pius XII, and as well as Pope Leo XIII. So let's pray for that too. All in all, a lot of prayers must be there must be a lot of prayers and praying from this point on. And yeah, I'm just going to end this video because otherwise I'll prattle on for too long. So thank you all for watching. God bless you all. God bless the Pope. See you in the next video, comrades. Until then.